Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today we're diving into the Singapore story, the memoirs of Lee Kuan Yew,
Oh, yeah.
Singapore's founding father.
Absolutely.
It's an incredible look at his
Yeah.
journey and all the challenges he faced building a nation basically from nothing.
Yeah, it really is a unique book. You get his personal journey, like you said,
Yeah,
but it also goes so much deeper. You get this firsthand account of Singapore's sudden independence,
right.
the threat of communism, the
Mhm.
struggle for merger with Malaysia, and then ultimately that heartbreak of separation. It's all there.
Yeah, you really get a sense of the weight of these events, not just like historically,
Oh, yeah.
but like the impact it had on him personally.
Absolutely.
So before we get into the details,
Okay.
why don't you give us a quick overview of the main themes?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest themes you'll pick up on is Lee Kuan Yew's pragmatism.
Okay.
He's faced with impossible choices throughout his life,
Right.
and he consistently chooses the path that ensures the survival of Singapore,
Yeah.
even if it means making unpopular decisions.
Right.
Another big one is this idea of multiracialism.
Sure.
Lee Kuan Yew was adamant about building a nation where people of all races and religions
Right.
could thrive.
Yeah.
And finally, you can't escape the theme of Singapore's vulnerability
Right.
as a tiny island nation
Right.
with no natural resources.
Right.
You know, that constant struggle against larger, more powerful forces is something that's palpable throughout the book.
Yeah, it really sets the stage for this incredible story he's about to tell.
Yeah,
So let's start at the beginning with his childhood.
sure.
He paints this picture of colonial Singapore,
Yeah.
this vibrant mix of cultures.
Right. And he talks about how his own upbringing was
Yeah.
a reflection of that.
Right.
Imagine, speaking English with your parents,
Yeah.
Baba Malay with your grandparents, and Malay with your friends. It's no wonder he was so focused on this multiracial society later on.
And his grandmother insisted he learn Chinese,
Yes.
even though he struggled with Mandarin at first.
Right.
That must have had a big impact on him.
Definitely. He even talks about his grandmother representing this older generation, expected to be subservient to men.
Right.
But she was clearly a strong woman,
Yeah.
determined to see her grandson succeed.
Uh-huh.
It's a sharp contrast with his more Western education at Raffles Institution and later at Cambridge.
Speaking of Cambridge,
Yeah.
I read he was a top student there.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know he came first in all of Singapore and Malaya
That's right.
for his senior Cambridge exams?
Yeah, but what I find interesting is that despite being academically gifted,
Right.
he wasn't some stuffy bookworm.
Okay.
He writes about getting into trouble for mimicking teachers, doodling caricatures of classmates,
Oh, wow.
and even drawing a bald spot on a teacher.
He sounds like quite a character.
Yeah. But then of course World War II breaks out, and his life, like so many others, changes irrevocably.
Right.
The Japanese occupation of Singapore
Yeah.
had a profound impact on him.
Yeah.
He describes the fear, the stench of these invading soldiers witnessing horrific acts.
Right.
It was really a crash course in the dark side of human nature.
He even worked as a black market trader during the occupation.
Yeah.
You can imagine the things that he must have seen.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's no wonder that his political awareness started solidifying during this time.
Absolutely. There's one passage where he describes the Japanese torture methods, and it's chilling.
Wow.
You can feel the visceral impact of that experience on him.
Yeah.
It's clear this period shaped his understanding of human nature violence and just the fragility of peace.
That's a really powerful point.
Mhm.
So we have this young Lee Kuan Yew
Yeah.
witnessing the brutality of war,
Yeah.
seeing the post-war chaos, the rise of communism,
Right.
the lack of strong local leadership. It's a lot to process.
Yeah, and it's in this crucible that he decides to study law.
Mm.
He also begins his romance with Kwa Geok Chow,
Mm-hmm.
who later becomes his wife. You
Right.
see this convergence of the personal and the political,
Yeah.
him building his own life while grappling with the future of his nation.
It's almost like the stage is being set for his future role.
Exactly. His personal experiences are deeply intertwined with his political awakening.
Right.
He's not just observing these events,
Yeah.
he's living through them.
Right.
And they're shaping his worldview in a profound way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he comes back to Singapore, newly minted lawyer, ready to start this life with Kwa Geok Chow.
Yeah.
But he can't escape this political turmoil that's brewing around him.
Not at all. He
Mhm.
starts his legal career,
Uh-huh.
but quickly grows disillusioned with colonial rule.
Okay.
He sees the inequalities,
Right.
the injustices, and starts to explore alternative ideologies like socialism.
It's interesting, though, because
Okay.
he wasn't blindly drawn to one ideology.
Right.
He was critical, you know?
Well, yeah.
He represented postal workers
Yeah.
and exposed the colonial government's bias.
Mhm.
He even defended a communist teacher in court,
Right.
not because he supported communism,
Yeah.
but because he believed in a fair trial.
That's one of the things that makes Lee Kuan Yew so fascinating.
Yeah.
He was always thinking strategically,
Right.
always trying to understand the forces at play.
Right.
And this is what ultimately leads him to form the People's Action Party.
The PAP,
Or PP.
a name synonymous with
Right.
Singaporean politics.
Yeah.
But at this point, it's just starting out. So
Yeah.
what are some of the early challenges they faced?
Well, for one, they need to build a broad base of support.
Okay.
Lee Kuan Yew realized he needed to connect with the Chinese-speaking majority.
Right.
So he did something pretty remarkable.
What's that?
He learned Hokkien,
Wow.
a completely different dialect
Okay.
from the Mandarin he grew up speaking,
Right.
to better connect with the working class.
Wow. That's dedication. It really shows his commitment to reach all these segments of society.
It does, and he was very astute in his observations of other political parties.
Okay.
He identified their weaknesses
Right.
and used that knowledge to the PAP's advantage.
It sounds like he was always a few steps ahead,
Right.
playing this intricate game of political chess.
Absolutely.
And then, of course,
Yeah.
there's the whole issue of merger with Malaysia,
Yeah.
a pivotal moment.
Absolutely. Remember, at this point, Singapore's political climate was incredibly volatile.
Okay.
The PIP had won its first elections, but they were dealing with struggles against pro-communist elements within their own party.
Right.
On top of that, you have the British still in control.
Right.
And then the whole question of whether Singapore should merge with Malaysia.
Right.
It was a pressure cooker.
It must have felt like being pulled in 1,000 directions.
Exactly. And Lee Kuan Yew is in the thick of it, navigating these complex currents.
Yeah.
He understood that independence was inevitable.
Yeah.
But he also saw the strategic benefits
Okay.
of merging with Malaysia.
Right.
At least initially, it was about survival,
Yeah.
finding the best path forward
Right.
for this vulnerable nation.
So he starts pushing for this merger.
Yeah.
But it wasn't without its challenges.
Right.
There were failed negotiations with the British, anxieties among Singaporeans
Right.
who weren't sure about joining Malaysia.
Yeah.
And, of course, this constant threat of communist influence.
And on top of all that,
Yeah.
Lee Kuan Yew had to contend with UMNO,
Okay.
the dominant Malay party in Malaysia.
Right.
There were clashes over ideology, racial tensions, and a growing distrust between the two sides.
It's almost hard to believe that he managed to hold it all together.
He was a master strategist. He
Yeah.
held secret meetings with the communist underground,
Wow.
negotiated with the British,
Right.
tried to appease UMNO,
Right.
all while trying to maintain control of his own party
Right.
and reassure the people of Singapore.
Like juggling chainsaws.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And then finally, after years of maneuvering
Right.
and negotiation, the merger happens.
Okay.
Singapore becomes part of Malaysia.
Right.
But as we know, it wasn't a happy ending.
No. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It seems like the honeymoon phase was very short-lived.
Very much so. There was initial optimism,
I
of
mean-
course, but the deep-seated tensions between Singapore and UMNO,
Right.
particularly around issues of race and economics, quickly resurfaced.
I remember reading about the race riots
Yeah,
that broke out in Singapore.
it was a turning point.
Yeah.
The riots exposed the fragility of the merger
Right.
and the depth of that racial divide.
Right.
Lee Kuan Yew was devastated,
Uh-huh.
but he also saw it as a wake-up call.
Okay.
It became clear that the vision he had for a multiracial meritocratic Singapore
Right.
was incompatible with the direction UMNO was taking Malaysia.
So what happened next? How did things unravel to the point of separation?
Well, Lee Kuan Yew continued to push for greater autonomy for Singapore within Malaysia, which further alienated UMNO leaders.
Okay.
He campaigned for a Malaysian Malaysia,
Right.
emphasizing equality for all races,
Uh-huh.
which was seen as a direct threat to Malay dominance.
Okay.
Tensions escalated, and eventually UMNO made the decision to expel Singapore from Malaysia.
I can only imagine how heartbreaking that must have been
Yeah,
for Lee Kuan Yew.
it was.
After all the effort
Yeah,
he put into this merger
right.
to see it fall apart so dramatically.
In the book, he describes the moment of separation
Yeah.
with raw emotion. He talks about the feeling of betrayal,
Mhm.
the uncertainty of the future, and
Yeah.
the immense responsibility he felt for the fate of Singapore.
Wow.
It's a powerful passage.
It must have felt like starting from scratch all over again.
Yeah. It's hard to fathom that weight. Leading your people into this merger thinking it's the best way forward,
Right.
only to have it just crumble before your eyes.
Right.
It makes you wonder, what do you even do after something like that?
You'd think it'd be utterly demoralizing.
But what's remarkable about Lee Kuan Yew is he doesn't dwell on the past.
Okay.
He immediately shifts his focus
Right.
to the future, to survival, to building a nation from this
Right.
broken dream.
It's like that pragmatism we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Kicks into overdrive.
Exactly. He knows Singapore is in a precarious position.
Uh-huh.
A tiny island with no natural resources, surrounded by potentially hostile neighbors.
Right.
He has to secure its future, and he outlines all of this in the Singapore story.
Okay.
It's almost like a blueprint for nation building.
So what does that blueprint look like?
Yeah.
What are the key elements he focuses on?
Well, economic development is a huge priority.
Okay.
He knows Singapore can't rely on anyone else.
Right.
So he attracts foreign investment, develops infrastructure, focuses on building a skilled workforce.
But it's not just about economics, right?
You're right.
He also puts a lot of emphasis on education and social harmony.
Absolutely. He understood that for Singapore to succeed, it had to be more than just an economic powerhouse. It had to be a place where people felt a sense of belonging,
Right.
where everyone had a stake in the nation's future.
Yeah.
So he invests heavily in education, promotes racial and religious harmony, and works to create this sense of shared identity.
It's fascinating how he weaves all these different threads together.
Yeah.
Economics, education,
Yeah.
social cohesion.
Yeah.
It's like this tapestry of nationhood.
And he doesn't shy away from tough decisions either.
Right.
He implements strict laws, cracks down on corruption, and prioritizes national interests above all else.
Okay.
He knows Singapore has to be different.
Right.
It has to be exceptional to survive.
It's a very pragmatic approach, but it also raises questions about
Yeah.
individual liberties.
Right.
The role of dissent.
That's a valid point.
Yeah.
And it's something Lee Kuan Yew grapples with in the book.
Okay.
He acknowledges the trade-offs,
Oh.
but ultimately he believes that for a young nation facing existential threats,
Yeah.
stability and security have to come first.
He also had to address the concerns of the English-educated population,
Right.
who were worried about being marginalized
Yeah.
in this predominantly Chinese-speaking nation. How did he manage that?
It's a testament to his political skill that he's able to balance these competing interests.
Okay.
He maintains English as a key language,
Right.
while also promoting Mandarin and other mother tongues.
Right.
He creates a system where everyone feels
Very
represented,
good.
even if it means some compromise.
So, looking back at the Singapore story,
Mm-hmm.
what are some key takeaways?
Well, first and foremost, it's a testament to the power of leadership.
Yeah.
Lee Kuan Yew's vision, his pragmatism, his unwavering commitment to Singapore's survival,
Yeah.
it all played a critical role in shaping the nation's destiny.
It's also a reminder that even the smallest of nations can achieve extraordinary things.
Absolutely.
Singapore's story is one of resilience, ingenuity,
All right.
and the triumph of human will over these seemingly insurmountable odds.
And I think there's a broader lesson here, too,
Okay.
about the importance of unity and shared purpose. Lee Kuan Yew was able to rally the people of Singapore
Yeah.
behind this common goal to build a nation where everyone could prosper.
Right.
It's a powerful reminder that even in a world of divisions and differences, we can achieve great things when we work together towards a shared vision.
The Singapore story is a fascinating and complex read.
It is.
It challenges us to think about the nature of leadership, the compromises we make for the greater good, and just this enduring human spirit
Absolutely.
that can overcome even the most daunting obstacles.
It certainly gives you a lot to ponder.
It does. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the Singapore story.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life and legacy of Lee Kuan Yew.
Yeah.
We hope you found it insightful, thought-provoking, and maybe even a little bit inspiring.
Definitely.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those pages turning.